I address this video to my Jewish friends and colleagues in different places in Canada and around the globe. Also to the Russian Federation and to the People's Republic of China. My name is Daniel Fitzgerald. I have one video left on YouTube. The government's hacked our iPhone and pulled down my videos on YouTube, the 3 that I had there. The last one is posted with the Nazi Holocaust, which I think I appreciate that. The reason for this video, as I indicated to Simon Wiesenthal Center, was because I'm notifying those that can access this video that we're filing in the Supreme Court of Canada against the Government of Canada. We're also filing, unfortunately, in the Supreme Court of Canada regarding my estate matter of my late mother who passed away. A part of this video is regarding that. I hired a lawyer named J.L. Lee Maloney in February, and I'll start with that first. I hired this attorney on or about February 2022 to handle the estate of my mother, Ruth Patricia Fitzgerald. And this lawyer mishandled the estate. He lied. He refused to send me documents at my request regarding his billing. There were several events that took place during his representation of the estate matter of my mother. My brother ran around with a will that he wrote up for my mom, a typed will, which is illegal in Canada, and started using it. In this will, he was executor, and in this will, I get my mom's house and property, which is valued at $500,000. And he's been using this will. The purpose of the will was that he didn't want me to have a shared executorship with him at 50-50. So I had someone go into the house after my mom died, and they got one will, I'm sorry, of Mr. Robert Scott Fitzgerald's that he typed up for my mother. She was under duress when he typed it. And that will was collected. And then this person went to a man named Peter Bonifant, a lawyer in Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada, because Mr. Bonifant had a will that he drew up for my mother in 2006. Or was it 8? I'm not sure. I got it here. So when this person went to Peter Bonifant in Crystal Beach, this person took my brother's will with this person, and Mr. Bonifant had a look at it. Mr. Bonifant immediately stated the will was illegal right away, and that his will was the dominant will. In his will, my brother and I split the estate 50-50, and both of us are executor trustee with individual powers to act without restriction. In the will, there is no clause that my brother and I have to agree to take action on the estate with the other person's permission, okay? So this was the legal will that was drawn up by my mom, and this is the will I'm going by. In this will, my brother gets 50% of everything, including 50% of my mom's property, valued at nearly $500,000. But my brother decided to go with his own will, which leaves me all of the property, which is a bit of a mystery. Now, when I hired J.L. Lee Maloney of the Chateau Laurier here in Ottawa, one of the things that I was concerned about, which I indicated to him, is that my mother has bills, her bills are going to stack up, and that the banks need to be contacted, so that they could pay her bills while the estate is being worked on. And Mr. Maloney said, no, I want to focus on the house and the property. This is what he said. Mr. Maloney received my mother's death certificates that I received from the funeral home, 5 of them. The 2 wills were sent to me along with other documents from this person in Crystal Beach, Fort Erie. And I gave them to Mr. Maloney. I gave him the death certificates. I gave him the 2 wills, okay? And upon Mr. Maloney's examination of the wills, he knew that the will my brother had typed up was illegal. Okay, but Mr. Maloney did not notify me, my attorney, telling me that the will that my brother drew up was illegal. Okay, he made the excuse that the laws on estates had changed on January 1st, 2022. This was intentionally misleading when Mr. Maloney knew. He should have advised me that my brother's will was illegal. He knew. He has 18 years of experience. So 3 times during between February and April, I asked Mr. Maloney for an advance on the estate because I'm guaranteed half of the estate. He declined. He stated that he wanted to be executor first. Okay. And he first of all, he said that he was going to get me a hedge fund. He told me this on the phone. I didn't know what he was talking about. Hedge fund for what? When I looked up hedge fund on Google, there was no such thing. I could not understand how a hedge fund was connected to the estate, you know. And when I asked him about this hedge fund at a later date, he couldn't remember even stating that to me. Because I needed a scooter because I have bad knees, you see. So I needed an advance at that time for that purpose. And then he said to me, well, okay, well, there's something called the Hansen Fund, and I'll look into that. He said he would do it the next day, okay? And so then I looked up the Hansen Fund, and the Hansen Fund is designed for lawyers who have absolute control of estate assets for someone who has a mental disability, where the person has no control whatsoever over how much money they get from their attorney, and their attorney holds on to the estate and decides whether the beneficiary should get any money and how much they should get at one time. So then I turned down the Hansen estate for that reason. I thought that my lawyer was suggesting that he would hold on to my estate and dole it out to me as he sees fit as the boss. Okay, I didn't accept that. Then after that, further conversations with Mr. Maloney regarding an advance. He told me in around March that in 2 months he'd be able to give me an advance. Well, that never happened. Okay. Then my mother's bills were stacking up. Mr. Maloney started having contact by email and telephonic communications with my brother. Okay. And during that time period, my brother was putting signs in the house, signs stating that this house, it's a 2-bedroom, and he was put a big advertisement sign in the window of the house advertising the house for sale and for potential buyers to contact him. Okay, he did not have my permission to put the house up for sale. He did not have my permission at all, but he went ahead and did this. He started loading up items from the house. My mom's contents of the house are half mine, okay? And he just simply goes there twice and starts loading up his truck. Maloney acted, according to Maloney, he acted with the land registry to block my brother from being able to sell the house, okay? Then I got a phone call from someone there. A letter was in my mother's door from a company called Gilmore Storage because my mom was in the rears with her storage. They didn't know she had passed away. Okay, and nobody notified them. And this person picked up that letter and opened it up. That person tried to contact me, and that person then contacted the storage company. And that person gave the storage company the contact information for my attorney, Mr. J.L. Lee Maloney. So then J.L. Lee Maloney called me, and he told me that this Gilmore Storage had contacted him. He said to me, Dan, what do you want to do about the storage? Do you want to keep it or let it go? I said, I want to keep it. And then Mr. Maloney said to me, well, don't worry, the storage is taken care of and your mother's bills are all taken care of. This is what this lawyer told me. So then by that point, I didn't really trust this attorney. You know, there was a question, there was the beginning of trust issues started to sort of flare up in my mind. So I called the storage facility and I asked the manager there at Gilmore Storage in Fort Erie, Ontario, did you speak to my attorney? And he said yes. And I said, well, did my attorney state to you he was going to pay for the storage? He said, no. He said, this Brian, the manager there, told me that my lawyer, J.L. Lee Maloney, told him that he would get back to him. Okay? So my lawyer, that was the first lie I caught him in, was my mother's storage. He said it was taken care of, okay, and that my mother's bills were taken care of. No, they were not. And then at a later date, my lawyer calls me and tells me that my mom's bills are stacking up, that he's not worried about the smaller bills, the little ones, but the storage was an issue, okay? So then regarding the storage, my lawyer called me and said that Gilmore Storage in Fort Erie had an attorney, okay? He didn't say why they had an attorney. He said they had an attorney, but the reason why they had an attorney was because when your storage goes into arrears here in Canada with a storage company, if you don't pay the arrears, what they do is they go and they have an attorney, and they have that attorney draw up documents for the court to seize your storage assets and take control of those assets, and then try to sell them to recover the payments that are late on the storage, okay? I already knew that. Then when I tried to call the storage facility, I tried to arrange with the banks. Some of the banks were willing to pay the storage fee, okay? They told me this if I provided the bill. And so subsequently what happened there is when I called the storage facility and I spoke to this man named Brian a second time, he told me that he was very ignorant and rude, told me he didn't want to talk to me. He told me that I had to talk to my lawyer. Even though I had offered to pay the storage, I told him the banks were willing to pay it. I just had to bring in his bill. Could he give me the bill? And he kept referring me to my attorney. So finally, when I got in touch with Mr. J.L. Lee Maloney about the storage, I said, well, Mr. Maloney, what's this attorney thing all about? You know, with the storage, I need to know, you know. Oh, I can't remember, he said to me. And that was it. I sent email after email to Mr. J.L. Lee Maloney with no response on the storage. Okay, none. I sent email after email to Mr. Maloney. Nothing. Then here's what happened during the time frame he represented me. It's now August 2022. I warned Mr. J.L. Maloney that this iPhone Pro 12 I'm doing this video on is hacked. The whole phone was hacked. I told him in the beginning there was no confidential privacy in his communications with me, nor mine with him. He didn't believe that for some reason. He didn't. Okay. So then one day I blocked his number because I almost fired him. Okay. And he tried to call me. And what happened was his call was rerouted to some man, according to his claims, named Mr. Tenzin. And when he called my number, this Mr. Tenzin answered the phone, and Mr. Tenzin told my lawyer that he's received 10 phone calls of people looking for me, but doesn't know who I am, and it's the wrong number. So after this happened, Maloney contacted me. He did get through. And he told me, Dan, your phone's hacked. You know, he said to me, we have to get you a secure phone. I said, oh, okay, that's fine, fantastic. He said, your phone's completely hacked. And then he said to me, well, you know, I'm not going to send you any more emails because your phone's hacked. And I agreed with that, okay, on the principle that for the reason that he had stated, okay. But Mr. Maloney said to me, well, you know, we'll just talk on the phone. Well, there's a bit of an issue there because the phone is hacked as well. So it's not just the hacking in my emails. Every time, I explained to Maloney, every time he would speak to me on the phone, that people are listening in. So then, at a later date, I think on the next call, next time I got through to this attorney, I said, well, Mr. Maloney, I want you to get that secure phone for me. And then he turns around and says to me, well, no, I can't until I'm executor. This is what he said. Well, the whole purpose of getting the secure phone is so that people could not listen into our conversations and could not read his communications to me by email. That was the whole idea. During the time frame when he might be passing me along confidential information on how he's going to fight my brother. Okay, so that didn't materialize. So he stopped emailing me with any information and would only talk to me on the phone. Okay. And this was a real problem for me because another thing, I had asked this attorney to give me monthly reports on billing outside of our contract. Okay. Because our contract only covers a certain kinds of work on the estate. All right. That the contract does not cover communications with my brother and emails. And I told Mr. Maloney that his communications with my brother and emails and telephone calls with my brother, I'm not paying for them. I'm not going to pay for those. And I did ask Mr. Maloney to stop communicating with my brother on several occasions, and I sent this request to him by email as well and recorded messages at his office with no response. To this very day, Mr. Maloney is still receiving emails from my brother. And he's reading them and he's billing the estate. Okay? So the reason Mr. Maloney lied about he used the phone's he agreed the phone was completely hacked. Okay? He knew also that our telephone communications were being listened in on. He knew that. He was breaching his own privacy and confidentiality rules of being attorney by continuing to talk to me on the telephone. Okay? And he knew that. He could have written me letters. He could have sent me a registered letter. He could have called me to come into his office. Okay. He's only less than 10 minutes away by bicycle or 5 minutes by bus. He didn't do any of that. To this day, it's ridiculous. Well, the reason why, you see, is because Maloney started picking up on the fact that, that I was starting to suspect that he was not representing me properly. And I already had information to prove that. Okay. And because of that, what he did was he simply used the hacking of my phone as an excuse not to follow up his hearsay phone conversations with emails to me that make it legal, whatever he says. So he decided to lie to me on the telephone every time on the grounds that if I fired him and took him to court and sued him for misrepresentation, that he could tell the court, well, everything he's saying is hearsay. Okay? That's why he refused to send me emails. All right? And that's actually what he pulled. On 2 occasions, Mr. Maloney berated me on the telephone, accusing me of mental illness. He did this twice. Not once, twice. While he's raving on and on about my brother, okay? Well, what he says about my brother is quite accurate and very true, unfortunately. But that doesn't apply to me because I'm not like that. There's nothing wrong with me at all. I have sent Mr. Maloney over between 300 and 400, 500 emails in the last 7 months, okay? 90% of the emails that I sent him were requests for information from him. I wanted to know, I told him I want him to send me monthly the billing outside of the contract so I could keep tabs on it because as executor and trustee, it's my duty to protect my mother's estate, okay? Mr. Maloney refused to do that, okay? I asked Mr. Maloney, after he filed in the Superior Court my affidavit of the 2 wills, I asked Mr. Maloney to please send me back the 5 death certificates that I gave him. He refused. I asked him to supply me information on all the people he contacted, the discussion threads, and he refused to. Mr. Maloney told me at one point that my brother went to an attorney, and he said he even had a letter and a statement from this attorney. My brother went to an attorney and wanted this attorney to file an application in the Superior Court to make him executor officially, stating to this attorney, there's no will. Okay? My brother used his 2016 will that he typed up with CIBC. Okay? CIBC apparently is investigating now because I gave them the actual legal will. And they're investigating my brother, according to what my branch told me. I have a letter from them. My brother went around, he went to the funeral home where my mom was buried, presenting his 2016 will. He presented his 2016 will to the city of Crystal Beach. I talked with them on the phone. He called the city of Crystal Beach and faxed them the 2016 will because he wanted them to shut the water off in the house. So I asked the employee of the Crystal Beach government, the water department, could she please go get that will that he faxed them, and I need to know particulars about which will he's using. So she did. I said to her, can you please read the will my brother faxed you for you to shut the water off? Does it say that I get the property, the house and the property? So she read it. She said, yes, it does. Okay. So he did this with this will. He's been going around using a will that's illegal. My brother went to this lawyer. He went to this lawyer to try and have himself appointed as executor, telling a lawyer that doesn't know him or know the case that there's no will. Well, the reason why my brother did that is because he was told that the 2016 will's no good. It's illegal. So then apparently a few hours later, after my brother attempted to do this, he called this attorney and told him he decided not to proceed with that. This is what my brother's been doing. At one point, Mr. Lee Maloney said to me on the phone, like out of the blue, he said, you know what this lawyer said to me? He said, if it hadn't been for your mother, Daniel, you wouldn't be getting a thing. This is what this lawyer said to me, and he said it in a very aggressive, accusational way. Now, I found out from 4 attorneys. I found out, well, first of all, Peter Bonifant said he looked at my brother's will that my brother had been using and said the will is clearly illegal. Then I had another attorney look at both wills. His name was Jeremy Rubenstein of Williams Litigation here in Ottawa. He looked at both wills. Okay, Mr. Rubenstein sent me an email telling me that the typed will is illegal. It's no good. It's the other will. I had another attorney tell me the same thing. Okay, but Mr. Maloney disagreed. When I told Lee Maloney that Jeremy Rubenstein sent me an email telling me that he examined the wills and that the typed will is illegal, when I told Maloney that, Mr. Maloney told me, oh, I was talking to Mr. Rubenstein on the phone. Well, why is he talking to Jeremy Rubenstein on the phone? That's another problem. What right does he have to communicate with Jeremy Rubenstein? Anyways, Mr. J.L. Lee Maloney told me, well, Mr. Rubenstein never told me that on the phone, that the 2016 will was no good. So Mr. Maloney, knowing that the will's no good, proceeded with it anyway. When you have, I say to the Supreme Court of Canada, as well as Simon Wiesenthal Center, when you have, 3 estate attorneys who are professionals, they're not what's referred to as newbies, okay? And the 4th lawyer didn't see the wills. I met this lawyer by accident in the park. He was sitting in a bicycle, or sitting at a bench. I drove up, he was on his bicycle. And I just simply started talking to him about the weather. And I asked him, oh, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm an estate lawyer. And I said, that's fantastic. Can I ask you a couple of questions? He said, sure. I got a little bit of time. Then I got to take off on my bike. He wasn't working that day. And I explained to him, I didn't have the wills with me, but I gave him a pretty good description. And I told him the other lawyer said the 2016 will was illegal. And he said, well, based on what you're telling me about these wills, it's true. The typed wills are no good. They're illegal. He made that very clear. Okay? But Mr. Maloney didn't think so. He kept going on and on about the 2016 will. He wouldn't stop. Mr. Maloney had an obligation also, and I say this to the Supreme Court, Simon Wiesenthal Center, and other friends I might have out there. Mr. Maloney had an obligation in February to tell me that the 2016 will was no good. He didn't do that at all. And then, finally, I decided to end the whole thing because I found out that the 2016 will was no good by 4 attorneys. So, in the beginning, I wanted Maloney to get me the property based on the 2016 will. Okay? But I decided to look into that, and I went to other attorneys because this lawyer did not tell me that will was no good. So when I went to the other attorneys and I found out officially that the 16 will my brother's running around with is no good, I then ordered Mr. Maloney, my attorney, to settle the matter 50-50 with my brother based on the Bonifant will. Okay, and that way my brother would get 50% of the property instead of me getting it all $500,000 worth. I decided to split it with him because the Bonifant will is the legal will. I don't feel my brother deserved it. Deserves the split, but legally, that's the legal will, and he has a right to 50%. No matter how much I don't like him and want nothing to do with him because he's crazy, he's entitled to it. Okay, and so I was doing the right thing in this matter. So Maloney did that. He said, "Oh, great." I offered to do this months before, but I was not convinced enough that that the 2016 will was in fact illegal. I felt that I needed more opinions, and I had a really hard time finding an attorney who would look at the wills for free because I don't have any money to pay an attorney. That was part of the problem. So I finally, once I determined in my own head that the 2006 will is the legal binding will of my mother, okay, I called Maloney. I told him that, look, I'm going to change this. We're going to split the estate 50-50 with my brother because the Bonifant will is the legal will. Okay? So he contacted my brother. My brother apparently had another attorney. Suddenly, there was another attorney involved. And but up to that point, Maloney was telling me my brother has no attorney, that my brother's emailing him, threatening him, telling him he's in cahoots with me and all these other things, which I know my brother would do. He threatened my mother's PSW workers with lawsuits. He threatened to sue them. So I knew that this information was correct because I knew what my brother had done in the past, threatening people with lawsuits. So I knew that my brother was berating Mr. Maloney and me. I knew that. So then when I told my lawyer I wanted to split the estate with him 50-50 according to the Bonifant will, it was for legal reasons. It was because the 2016 will's no good. And Mr. Maloney agreed to do that. So then Mr. Maloney told me my brother had an attorney. And I'm thinking, an attorney? Why didn't you send me an email telling me this a while ago that he has another attorney? So then he contacted my brother's attorney and told him that we were willing to split the estate 50-50. My brother's attorney talked to my brother, and my brother agreed, okay, to split the estate 50-50. And then Maloney told me, Dan, I'm going to put the house up for sale very quickly. Within the next 8 weeks, it'll be up for sale or sold. Real estate agent's going in there right away. Okay, he told me all this, and we'll have this thing wrapped up. Your brother's agreed to this. So then I said to him, well, I got a problem with the boat. The owner has other people looking at my boat, and maybe I should just give the boat up and when I get the estate, I'll look for another one. I'll just tell the owner because I don't want to keep him waiting. You know, he's got other people looking. He's holding on to it for me based on my promises. So then Maloney turns around and tells me, don't do that. He said, you tell the owner that soon you'll have more than enough money to take the boat off his property. Like, this is what he told me to tell him. And then he even added, you can tell the owner to contact me. So I contact the owner of the boat, tell him, don't worry, this thing's settled. I'll have the boat out of there within a couple of months, I told him. Okay? And everything was hunky-dory. This happened 3 weeks ago. Okay? It's right now it's August 10th today. Okay? It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow that Maloney told me these things. Okay? So then, during that time period, I emailed Maloney and called him and left him messages telling him I want the $20,000 advance because my mom needs a headstone. This was another problem. I wanted to go to the banks and see if there was enough money in my mom's accounts to pay for the headstones. The headstone for her that I had chosen, which is ready to go. The headstone company sent me the photograph of the headstone that I wanted, what I wanted on it. And the banks said to me they would be willing to maybe pay for it if I brought the bill. Okay? But Maloney's telling me not to do that. He's telling me, no, don't do that. Don't go to the banks, right? But I went to the banks anyway. Now, the first round of appointments I made with the Royal Bank of Canada, the CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and Scotiabank, the first round of appointments I made, the banks made the appointments, no questions asked, okay? They didn't indicate anything to me in the emails and texts confirming the appointments. So, but anyways, I canceled. I couldn't make up my mind whether I would go or not. Plus, I was really upset about my mom's death. And every time I thought about going to the banks, at that time, it would send me into tears because of her loss. So I delayed until I had enough in me, till I had gotten over her death, at least enough not to start crying while trying to do business at the banks. And so then what happened here was I made 2 or 3 appointments in the last 2 months and canceled all of them, okay? So then I finally told Maloney that I'm going to the banks. I called Maloney. I said, well, look, I have appointments with the banks. He said to me, which banks? I said, RBC, Scotia, and CIBC. Oh, where? I said, in Ottawa. Oh, where are they located? I said, on Rideau Street. Okay? Now, here's what happened. After I told them that, after I made the next round of appointments without canceling them due to, feeling I would get emotionally in tears, the banks all of a sudden start requesting, they started sending me, to confirm the appointments, indicating copies of the will aren't accepted. And you have to have unexpired ID. They started doing that just out of the blue. This was after I told Mr. Maloney which banks I was going to. Okay? And where they were located. That's when all this started happening. You see, here's the problem for Maloney. You see, I have identification. I've got copies of my driver's license from British Columbia, and I have my birth certificate, social insurance number in color as a photocopy. And I have my expired passport. Okay, the passport ID is still legal. Okay? The passport itself can't be used, but my identification on it certainly can. All right? And you see, when I hired Maloney, okay, he told me to take photographs with my phone of my ID because he said he needed a piece of ID from me in order to pursue the case. This is what he said. So I took photographs with the camera on my iPhone that I'm talking to you on of my ID, and I sent it to him, okay? Because he needed to use my ID to file in the court, right? The court accepted my ID for filing the affidavit. So the only person that knew that my passport was expired and that the will was a copy, okay, was Mr. Maloney. No one else knew. And I hadn't used my ID with any banks in a long, long time, okay? The banks, so when the banks suddenly came out of the blue, what had happened here, Maloney notified the banks that I didn't have the right ID. That's what he did. And he notified them somehow that I had only a copy of Bonifant's will. You see, Mr. Maloney was taking over my estate. Mr. Maloney took advantage of me and bullied me and would not listen to any of my requests from him and act on them at all, period. Mr. Maloney was acting on his own, okay, without my permission on several fronts, okay? And Mr. Maloney went against me as his client, okay? And the reason why he did that, there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is because my wife is on disability, and I should be on disability because of my knees. We're very poor people, okay? And he figured he could bully us. And the second reason is because I tried to look for another attorney all over Ottawa, an estate attorney who would take over for Mr. Maloney, okay, a legitimate lawyer who would do the job that's required. And every one of them wanted a retainer. I could not find another attorney in Ottawa who would take the estate matter on a percentage basis. Okay, so he really had me good. And he was doing whatever he wanted. He was billing the estate, and billing the estate, and I don't know what he was billing the estate for because he never gave me a monthly data sheet on what he's been up to, who he's contacted, how much it cost me. Nothing. He was just completely on his own, billing the estate and doing whatever he wants without explaining to me what he's doing and how much it's going to cost. I asked him, he said he had to hire another lawyer to put a mark on the land registries that would stop my brother from selling the house. Okay? I asked him how much that cost. He never told me. I repeatedly asked him for explanations regarding my mom's storage. He refused to tell me. His excuses was, oh, well, I have notes around here somewhere. That's his excuse. So Mr. Maloney promised me, when he called me to tell me my brother had accepted the 50-50 division of the estate, he told me not to tell the boat owner to give the boat away. He told me to tell the boat owner to contact him if there was a problem, and to tell the boat owner to have my money very soon, and more than enough to cover the boat, to reassure him. Okay, that's how sure Mr. Maloney was. When all last week I tried to email him and call him requesting a $20,000 advance on the estate based on the premise that the estate was settled with my brother. Okay, which means Mr. Maloney could have released the funds. Okay? And I pressed him on that, and then he contacts me and tells me he has a progress report that I need to talk with him about. Okay? So then I called. At that time, I was already maliciously against him already because he wasn't responding to my request for an advance. My mother needs a headstone. I need a laptop and a printer to start the case against the government with the Supreme Court outside of the estate. Okay? And other things that need to be taken care of. So I called Mr. Maloney's office just last week. I told him, and he answered the phone. And I said, oh, I'm calling Mr. Maloney. I have a progress report for you. And he kind of smartly, in a smart sort of analytical attitude, said to me, oh, what's that, Daniel? I said, well, Mr. Maloney, I've got people watching the house in Crystal Beach, and I just called them. Nothing's happened with that house. There's been no real estate agent, as you said. There's no for sale sign on the house. There's nothing. And you know what he told me? He said, well, the reason why is because your brother's gone crazy. He said to me his lawyer bailed on him, like the other lawyer bailed on him as well, apparently. These are two lawyers. This is what he's claiming. And that my brother's berating Mr. Maloney and me, accusing us of being in cahoots and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, how would Mr. Maloney know about that? Well, first of all, he's been receiving emails from my brother. He's reading all of them. Mr. Maloney has taken no action. He's known now for 5 of the 7 months, because this is August, we're in the 8th month now of this estate matter. He's known now for months that my brother is a liar. He's known this. Mr. Maloney took no action at all in the court to have him removed as executor as a result of what my brother did. My brother put signs on the house, trying to sell the house illegally against my will, without informing me or asking me if I wanted to do that. My brother went around with an illegal will that he knew was illegal. When he found out his will was no damn good, he went to an attorney, okay, to apply to the Superior Court of Ontario to make him executor, telling his lawyer a lie that there's no will. This is what my brother did. Okay? He committed fraud. That's fraud. When you knowingly go around with another will. And then my lawyer told me, he said, your brother wants to steal the entire estate from you. Okay? This lawyer should have put a motion before the court a long time ago to simply have him removed, to go in with the signs my brother put on the house, trying to sell the house under my feet, okay, and keep the money for himself is what he was doing. Then, I'll tell you another point here. About 3.5 weeks ago, or a little longer, I had another conversation with Mr. Maloney, because I was going to the banks, you see. And then Mr. Maloney said that my brother told him that he doesn't want me having access to my mother's trust accounts. That's what Maloney told me. Now, when I asked Mr. Maloney about that just the other day, I said, Mr. Maloney, you told me that my brother told you that he didn't want me having access to my mother's trust accounts. And Mr. Maloney says, oh, I don't remember saying that. I'll have to look at my notes. Mr. Maloney has been intentionally stalling my getting my estate, making himself more money, okay, without taking the appropriate action to have my brother removed. All right, the Superior Court of Ontario refused my brother's application. My brother was served a notice by my attorney a while back, giving him notice that he has 30 days to respond to my affidavit in the Superior Court. My brother went in there with an application of response. They didn't accept it because he did it up wrong, okay? So then, according to Mr. Maloney, my brother tried again to file a response. In his response, he's accusing me of being a criminal with the Superior Court of Ontario, that I'm a criminal and my criminal history, which I really don't have. I don't have a criminal history. I have one only. Okay, in 2008, in a drunken stupor, because of the filthy Liberal McGuinty government of Ontario funding the CAS, and this is the other matter that's going to go to the Supreme Court of Canada, abused my daughter, our baby. They were abusing her and trying to blackmail us into doing what we were told, this Children's Aid Society, backed up by the McGuinty government, and no independent oversight where parents could go to complain and have the CAS investigated criminally. Okay, so it was quite a loss for my wife and I got drunk and emailed and threatened this premier. That's all I did. That's the only thing I did. Okay, so where my brother gets off going to the court, and just why the clerk of the court would accept that application is beyond me, because before the clerks can accept an application from a respondent, they have to make sure that the contents deal with the matter within the construct of the matter itself. It's an estate matter. Now, if my brother had filed in the Superior Court a response that I could not be trusted to be executor, or accusations I would steal from the estate, anything to do with the estate and accusations against me regarding my power of attorney of the estate is allowable. But going to the court and slandering me and libeling me and accusing me of being a dirty, filthy criminal, this is inappropriate. And the clerk's office should have known better, okay? So he did this, and he had no right to do that. Just why the Superior Court of Welland, Ontario, accepted his application is a little bit beyond me. Obviously, there's a mystery question there. So I warned J.L. Lee Maloney that I'd take the matter to the Supreme Court. I warned him a number of times, okay, that I will dismiss him. Also, I want to, before I go, because I want to make this short, I'm at 42 minutes now, so I want to make this as short as I can. I contacted the Supreme Court Registry of Canada here in Ottawa, okay, and I started, because I was suspicious of Maloney, I couldn't hire another attorney. No attorney would take the case without a retainer. We don't have one. So I started to tell the Supreme Court of Canada Registry in phone messages that I started telling them about some of the oddities of Mr. Maloney. Okay? And I left them 5 or 6 messages explaining some of the things Mr. Maloney was pulling in the hope that maybe they would become suspicious themselves. So after I did that, one day I called them, the Supreme Court Registry here in Ottawa, and a lady answered the phone there, one of these people that worked there. She was very nice, and I thank her very kindly for taking all my calls. I thank you in the Supreme Court for taking all my phone calls and my messages. I appreciate that. It means a lot. Obviously, when I called the Supreme Court that day, they were aware of the messages regarding the handling of my estate by this attorney. Okay, they were obviously aware. And the female employee who spoke with me on the phone that day said to me, look, Mr. Fitzgerald, file your application regarding the estate. Which means that they possibly believed, that my lawyer was outright not acting appropriately. Now, here's the thing. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to file at the Supreme Court about the estate because there's the other matter, and it's a lot of work to take on both. But now I have no choice because I've fired this attorney. He's done. He's gone. So I do have to file in the Supreme Court. My wife and I have a right to. We're living in danger here because I have evidence proving that the Canadian government on Parliament Hill that they're in with the Italian mafia. And the Canadian government has created a RCMP, and over a decade or so has been mafiaizing our police forces here and Nazifying them. Okay, and they've been using, the government of Canada on Parliament Hill has been using the corruption that they've developed in law enforcement, gangs, and so on, to go after and silence all their victims that have evidence against them, threatening them with jail, trying to frame them, keeping them under 24/7 surveillance, hacking their Androids and iPhones, erasing evidence through internet hacking. This is what the RCMP have been doing. Recently, there was a Canadian Federal Senate investigation of RCMP spying, and apparently the RCMP at one point had 49 targets that where they went to a Superior Court judge to get a warrant to hack the targets, electronic devices, iPhones, Androids, whatever. I have no doubt I was one of those targets, okay? But you see, what the government and the media, I read this article in the media recently about this investigation that's gone public in the Senate. And after reading it, the government's lying, and so are the Mounties. They're both lying. The government uses the police to put pressure on their victims to remain silent. Okay, and the government of Canada and their provinces are using organized criminal syndicates in the police to commit these acts, which is what happened to us. So a percentage of the people under surveillance on order from the government to the Mounties, the Ottawa Police Service, and other Canadian jurisdictions is to keep the victims under surveillance. That's what the Trudeau government's been doing in reality. Okay. Our case is a Nazi Nuremberg case against the government of Canada. I will explain before I go. I want to be brief about this. As I tried to explain to Rabbi Marvin Hier in my message to him yesterday on his voicemail at the center, many people believe, and I don't blame them, Canadians and American people. Many Canadians believe that Trudeau's actions against the protesters, police with clubs and on horseback running our people over, that's terrible. That is disgraceful. It's ungodly. It's evil. From a religious point of view, because I'm an Orthodox Christian Jew, that's disgusting. I mean, I pray to God to destroy them. I hope he just hammers Ottawa. I keep praying for him to come here and destroy them. But anyway, that's a religious matter for me to discuss with my Father Yahweh. Okay? Canadians believe that Trudeau's a communist. Now, I want to make a point on this. Okay? I explained this to Rabbi Marvin Hier. I'm going to explain it in the video. And to an extent, Canadians who believe Trudeau's a communist because of his policies against the convoy protesters here. Okay? Yes, that's true. He is. I have the document here. Let me show it to you. I can put it on camera. I think there it is. This here is the Nuremberg laws, that the original Nuremberg law document that I had printed off. Okay, and this whole document came out as one. Now, I'll briefly discuss this with you. It was on or about February 1933 that Hitler brought out number one, the suspending of important provisions of the German Constitution. Two, especially those safeguarding individual rights and due process of law. Okay? And what this is referring to is this here. These are the restrictions that Hitler came out with. There are 6 of them. Now, let me make it clear here for Canadians, or those of you that think that Trudeau's a communist. These are the restrictions that he applied against the protesters. And the female, one of the organizers of the protester that was locked up without bail here in Ottawa, Mr. Hitler on Parliament Hill, Trudeau applied these 6 restrictions. And let me read them to you. And you'll be familiar with them. The Canadian people and the American people, you will all be familiar with these. Right to assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, removal of all restraints on police investigations, freedom to arrest and incarcerate political opponents without specific cause. That's why Harper brought in Bill C-51. There was no terrorist attacks here. No. Harper brought in Bill C-51 to give it to the new Nazi skinheads taking over the police. And that's why he brought in 51. It's a Nazi surveillance policy, Bill C-51, and that's exactly why he brought it in, giving the Nazis that had started infiltrating law enforcement across Canada, the military, they're building up. So he started creating policies that he could justify in front of the Canadian people. Okay, but really, this is a Nazi policy, Bill C-51, and it's used for Nazi surveillance. Okay, for all those who start seeing the Nazis building up insecurity and start complaining, they all had to be put under surveillance. That's the reason for 51. Now, the final one, number 6, is dissolve political organizations and suppress publications. Okay? Now, let me explain something about that. Canadians who think that Trudeau's in with Beijing, with President Xi Jinping, that's not the case. I can assure the Canadian people, the American people, China has no use for Trudeau at all, wants nothing to do with him. They can't stand him. And I can speak for the Chinese government when I say this. Matter of fact, let me tell you something. I speak for President Xi Jinping himself with this statement. President Xi Jinping has no use whatsoever for the Canadian government and literally cannot stand the sight of Justin Trudeau. And I want to make that clear to the Canadian people who think that this pathetic Hitler is a communist Lenin in with Beijing. And now I'm going to explain why they think this. When Hitler came into power, he had a temporary Axis pact with Joseph Stalin, the communist secretary general of the former Soviet Union. Okay, as a result of that temporary peace pact, Hitler sent a couple SS people or some high-ranking official in his government to Moscow, because that official was to go to Moscow and learn from Stalin's security about the laws of restrictions under the communist system against the freedoms of the Soviet people of that time period. Okay, so this high-ranking German official returned to Berlin, explaining to Hitler the 6 restrictions of Stalin. You see, these same 6 restrictions, these are the same policies of the communist Chinese government regarding, and what these restrictions are designed for in the communist system. These restrictions are strictly aimed to block their citizens in communist states from protesting against the government. That's what these restrictions actually are. Okay? And they do come originally from communist Stalin. But in order for Canadians and other populaces to accuse Trudeau of not being a communist but being a Nazi, you have to have a case where Trudeau applied the second part down here. See this? These are the Nuremberg laws used against my people, the Jewish people. Right here. Okay? Now, so you have to have, on top of this, in order to prove that Trudeau's not a communist leader, according to the 6 policies here of Adolf Hitler, that Trudeau cloned and copied and used against the protesters, including my wife and I, by the way. He used some of these against my wife and I. You have to have victims who can prove that Trudeau applied the Nuremberg laws in order for him to be accused of being a Nazi. Do you understand this? But you have to have victims where Trudeau applied the Nuremberg laws in order for him to be proven not to be a communist under rulership of Beijing and President Xi. You have to have witnesses who've had this applied to them. And it can't be more than one Nuremberg law. Okay? There has to be proof of or statements of a proportional amount of the Nuremberg laws applied against a person by his or her government, because it's going to take 4 or 5 of them to confirm that the government brought the Nuremberg laws in as policy. Now let me read the Nuremberg laws to you. Random attacks on Jewish people and their property. They did that to us. Our boats' names were Jacob's Goshen and Jacob's Ladder. These were anti-Semitic hatred attacks against us and me as a Jew. Police and court no longer protect Jewish people. Absolutely. Applied against my wife and I, both of us, for 15 years. Jews no longer permitted to be in possession of electrical, optical equipment, bicycles, typewriters, records, or recording equipment. Now, let's leave the bicycle thing aside. Let me just finish this list and then I'll explain. Jewish passports for travel restricted. This was applied. Jews evicted from homes without due cause or reason. That was applied. But in our case, we were forced to leave our homes. Okay, it's the same thing. Law designating Jews as subjects of the Reich applied. Okay? Well, I'll just read them all to you. Jews not permitted to own message pigeons. That was not applied because we didn't have any pigeons. Jews' passports declined and seized by the Reich. Yeah, halfway there. Laws on the press. October 4th, 1934. Law on editors of news media bans Jews from editorial posts in German newspapers. Oh, that was absolutely applied by Trudeau against us. My wife and I could not get an appointment with a reporter ever. Nowhere. Okay? CTV News asked me to email them. I did. I emailed them over and over again. No response. No reporter. The last one is the Gestapo. Gestapo recruiting informers in all German sectors employs eyes and ears everywhere. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Nazis in the police and the Trudeau government. The police have recruited thousands of thumb jobs on the street. My wife gets harassed downtown by people she doesn't know. In one case, a man stood there with his Android and was staring right at my wife with dirty looks. She never saw him before in her life. How did he know who she was? And started punching things on his phone, giving her a dirty look. The other day, my wife went out. Some man turned around and punched her arm so hard, she had to take Tylenol when she came home. This was done intentionally. My wife is being harassed at the Women's Center at St. Joseph's Church here by the employees. My wife was being harassed at this place called The Mission in Ottawa, where she went and lined up for a free lunch for me, by men she's never seen before, who are staring right at her, who knows who she is, but she doesn't know them. This is what's been going on here. Also, I'll report to you people that recently on MSN's horoscopes in Sagittarius and Aries, I'm Aries, my wife is Sagittarius according to the zodiac, and I don't believe in the zodiac. I'm Jewish. I don't. The problem for us is that the government of Canada and our enemies have been using Aries and Sagittarius horoscopes, threatening us in those horoscopes by stating subtle sentences and paragraphs regarding us personally that nobody knows about except for us. That's how we know they're doing this. Okay? The threats from Aries and Sagittarius horoscopes on MSN have been going on against us for years. I'm going to prove it to the Supreme Court. The Central Intelligence Agency of the United States and the U.S. government, okay, have been using horoscopes, sending them to key people in public, secretively, coded to some extent. With other people, they threaten other people, and only the people that are threatened by them know when they read the horoscopes that the government's threatening them because of key words that the government state in their horoscopes threatening them, and they know it's them. Because within the context of a person's horoscope, they'll mention something that, like, for example, they put something in my wife's horoscope more recently, and I read it to my wife. This was last week. And my wife said to me, "Dan, only you and I talked about that in the house here. How could a crystal ball at MSN know?" Because we talked about this particular item here, privately in our home, and they put it in our horoscope. That's their way of notifying us that they have a listening device in our apartment. Okay? And so they always put in some kind of surefire clue within the paragraph or sentence structure of a horoscope, our horoscopes, so that we know. No one else will know. The populace won't know. But we will know. Only we will know it's aimed at us. They'll put something in there that only my wife and I know about. So anyways, that's been going on. So I'm letting people know. And this video is for the Supreme Court of Canada. I tell you, Supreme Court of Canada, and this message is also for Justice Richard Wagner. And Mr. Chief Justice, your government, Mr. Chief Justice, committed crimes against my wife and I. And while I'm mentioning this, Mr. Chief Justice Richard Wagner, I would ask you, Mr. Chief Justice, to contact Mr. Trudeau, okay, and ask him why he told Marc Garneau, the former transport minister, to cover up all the criminal evidence we sent him regarding crimes against us and our property by the police and the Hells Angels. Okay, Mr. Chief Justice, I hope, Your Honor, you get my message. Your Honor, I say this on YouTube to you, Mr. Chief Justice Richard Wagner. You need to tell your Prime Minister that he needs to consult with his attorneys on this matter, because he's in big trouble, Mr. Chief Justice. I will destroy your government, Richard Wagner, in the Supreme Court. I will invite, Mr. Chief Justice, in the galleries, the media. I will invite Russian diplomats. I will invite Chinese diplomats, Mr. Chief Justice. This case is going to be open, Mr. Chief Justice, to the international community. I will invite, Mr. Chief Justice, international diplomatic dignitaries. I will invite Sergei Lavrov, Mr. Chief Justice. Okay? The world needs to hear, Mr. Wagner, what your government did to my wife and I. And it's about time the world did. If Trudeau wants to settle out of court, Mr. Chief Justice, that's fine. Tell him to get started and make me an offer. Don't threaten me and my wife in horoscopes. Tell him, Mr. Chief Justice. Tell him to stop doing that. And Mr. Chief Justice, to you, sir, your Prime Minister knows all the crimes that him and the Conservatives committed against my wife and I. I'm going to be sending you today, Mr. Chief Justice, your court, a copy of the Transport Canada commercial shipping detention, Mr. Chief Justice. I'm going to send that to the court today as soon as I take a photo of it on my iPhone, and I hope, Mr. Chief Justice, you graciously accept it. They, Mr. Chief Justice, they are psychopathic mafia figures on Parliament Hill playing legitimate politicians serving the interests of the Canadian people, Justice Wagner. So I ask you, Mr. Chief Justice, to hear this matter. I ask you also, Mr. Chief Justice Richard Wagner, to drop the rules of the court completely, because this case, Mr. Chief Justice, requires justice against the government urgently. And I'm not an attorney, Mr. Chief Justice. I do not have $1 million, Mr. Chief Justice, to hire an attorney here that does constitutional work in your courts as representative for my wife and I. I don't have it. Also, Mr. Chief Justice, these constitutional lawyers here in Ottawa who claim they fight human rights, Mr. Chief Justice, who claim they take on cases of violations of the Charter, Mr. Chief Justice, Lawrence Greenspan, Paul Deschamps, you know him, Chief Justice Wagner? But these lawyers? These are high-profile lawyers, Mr. Chief Justice. Our case is an open and shut case. If they had only were willing to meet with my wife and I and see all our material, they could have asked for any number figure they wanted from the government. They would have got it. Mr. Chief Justice, isn't that strange how these high-profile lawyers could have made $10 million on this case for their own pockets, and every lawyer in Ottawa refused to even see the evidence? Can someone explain that? That's how far out, Mr. Chief Justice, your government has slandered my wife and I. They've slandered our characters everywhere, Mr. Chief Justice. Everywhere. Lawyers, the police. They have the police running around for them, Mr. Chief Justice, behind our backs, slandering my character and that of my wife. My wife, Mr. Chief Justice, receiving daily threats from strangers as she walks downtown, Justice Wagner. So I ask you, Mr. Chief Justice, again, and a little bit more direct from YouTube, I ask you, you know, Mr. Chief Justice Richard Wagner, Mr. Trudeau, he offered you a temporary position as Governor General after he framed the last one, Mr. Chief Justice, for sexual misconduct that never happened. It didn't happen, Richard. Never. So, I appeal to you and your colleagues through this video, Mr. Chief Justice, and also I'll say to you, Your Honor, respectfully, and your colleagues, Mr. Chief Justice, Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Har and his colleagues, even though we've had our differences, okay? Mr. Chief Justice, they all believe us. They believe your government applied the Nuremberg laws. I explained it to them, Chief Justice Wagner, for 3 or 4 years in many recorded messages, Your Honor, of what your government did. Your government are Nazis, Mr. Chief Justice. And when I come before you and your colleagues with my wife, you're going to get sworn testimony, Mr. Chief Justice. Okay, and the only summation that can come out, a decision that can come out of you and your colleagues, Mr. Chief Justice, is they're guilty. Your government will be hated, Mr. Chief Justice, globally. The only support Trudeau will have in Parliament is with Donald Trump, Obama, and Biden. And that's it. And I'd like to point out, Mr. Chief Justice, to you now in this video, if I may be so bold, we'll be using evidence, Mr. Chief Justice, of commentaries in the House of Commons by the opposition. For example, Mr. Paul, I believe, if I'm correct, Mr. Poilievre stood in the House of Commons, Mr. Chief Justice, before the Canadian people and said to Mr. Trudeau, reading from a document, is it not true, Mr. Prime Minister, that you stood right in front of a man with a Nazi swastika? And your response to him when he said hello was, thank you for coming. Is that not true, Mr. Chief Justice? I think so. And Mr. Chief Justice, the people here that showed up with swastikas, the few that did, you see, Mr. Chief Justice, Trudeau manipulated that. Those people, Mr. Chief Justice, were accusing Trudeau of being a Nazi, you see. But Trudeau manipulated that in the House of Commons, accusing them of being white supremacists when he knew in his heart that they were accusing him of being a Nazi. And he is a Nazi, Mr. Chief Justice. And I can prove that to you and your colleagues anytime. Okay. I also say to the Supreme Court, I say to you, Mr. Chief Justice, I contacted the Chinese consulate here. Okay. They gave me permission, Your Honor, to bring documents of our case against Canada and give them to their security outside on Patrick Street for the Security Council, Your Honor. The Russians, Your Honor, already have copies of our file. I took it to them in sections 2 years ago. Okay? And as soon as the police started seeing me passing our case file that I typed up on our laptop, well, your RCMP, Mr. Chief Justice, were illegally hacking my laptop and hacking our Motorola phone. As soon as they saw me giving documents to the Russians through the fence, they reported it to Trudeau, Your Honor. You know what he did? He comes out to the Canadian people in the media and said, and accused the Russians, Your Honor, of breaking into our COVID-19 lab. They never did that. He just simply threatened them for my giving them material through their fence. Every time I went to the Russian consulate, Your Honor, I was followed by the RCMP and the Ottawa Police Service. They're reporting directly to your Prime Minister. That's disgusting what they did to the Russian government, Your Honor. Disgusting. The Nuremberg laws, Mr. Chief Justice, were applied by your government. I have enough evidence, Mr. Chief Justice, and statements from both my wife and I to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we don't need beyond a reasonable doubt, Mr. Chief Justice, in a civil court of the Supreme Court. The evidence required to have Trudeau prosecuted by the Supreme Court justices, Your Excellency, and Parliament Hill is far less than what's required in a criminal trial, as you know. I would prefer, Justice Wagner, if you took this thing on personally, okay, and told this Prime Minister, simply tell him what Beverly McLaughlin told him over the Cotter case, Mr. Chief Justice. Tell him. He won't be able to appeal it, Mr. Chief Justice, because you're not going to want this to go public, all right, because he'll be destroyed and so will Parliament. They should all be arrested, Mr. Chief Justice. Mr. Chief Justice, your government and the Conservatives, they cut deals, Mr. Chief Justice, with the opposition, okay, to seal our case. Which means, Mr. Chief Justice, I could not go to the Parliament with the file and ask an MP to take the file and bring it up during question period, accusing the government and asking them why they did all these things. Why, Mr. Chief Justice, did Marc Garneau, when he received a criminal package from my wife and I, per his office's request, did he simply remain silent and not say anything? He covered it up, Your Honor. Also, Your Honor, there's embarrassment for the U.S. consulate. My wife went in there in 212, Mr. Chief Justice, gave them a package. Okay, they covered it up. I gave them the package in 220, Mr. Chief Justice. The FBI in Albany, New York was expecting it. They were going to take a look and try and help us. The package was also addressed to the President of the United States in the White House, Donald Trump, Mr. Chief Justice. What did the U.S. consul do? They did Trudeau and the government a favor. They handed it back. They handed it to the RSO office, which is regional security. I called Washington, Mr. Chief Justice, and spoke with the FBI about this. Okay? An FBI agent told me in Washington, Justice Wagner, she said to me on the telephone, well, why didn't you contact our FBI office at our embassy? I said to her, I've been trying to contact them for years. Every time I called the embassy over the last 10 years, asking to be redirected to the FBI's office on site, They kept telling me they're not in. Yeah, that's what they did. And there's more to this, Mr. Chief Justice. I'm just giving you the 15-minute redacted version. Anyways, I'm going to go. I got to post this on YouTube. Rabbi Marvin Hier, if you see this video, Rabbi, I need Rabbi Hier for you to cooperate with me, please. I need you to find a laptop in your office somewhere, okay, and get it to me here at Ottawa as quickly as possible. I want you, Rabbi Hier, to get it to Rabbi Boyarsky, Shea M. Boyarsky of the Friel Street Chabad. Don't send it to me. I have to have a laptop, Rabbi Hier, to start the case against the government in the Supreme Court. I have to write it all up on the laptop and send it by electronic communication to the Supreme Court registry. Please, Rabbi Hier, will you do this? I'll call your secretary and let her know that I've posted the video, and hopefully you will all take a look at it. That laptop, listen to me, Rabbi Hier, if you want victory against Nazism in Canada, I'm going to give it to you. But in return, Rabbi, I don't care, Rabbi Hier, if you got a $200 or $300 laptop sitting around collecting dust, get it to Rabbi Boyarsky and tell him to contact me when he gets it. Please, Rabbi Hier. It's the only way, Rabbi Hier, I can stop Canada. Please. Shalom, God bless. And I say to all of you, may the Sabbath, Justice Wagner, for you and your colleagues be a blessing. Justice Wagner, do you hear me? May God, Justice Wagner, give you wisdom to help my wife and I, and to make the Canadian government pay, Mr. Chief Justice, not just personally for what they did to my wife and I, but what this government, Mr. Chief Justice, has been doing to Canadians without them knowing that they've adopted the Nazi Reich Nuremberg laws. And the police have been enforcing them, Justice Wagner. And that's the saddest part of my communication to you. Shalom.